Welcome to the Grange Podcast, where we strive to rekindle the spirit of community and belonging. Our mission is simple, yet profound: to foster transparent communication and share valuable information that brings us closer together. Join us as we explore stories, insights, and conversations with the intent of building a stronger, more connected community, one episode at a time. Today, my guest is Ashley Pratt. Ashley is a wife and mother, an avid volunteer, a pig farmer, and the Kettle River Jr Grange number 413 leader. During our conversation, we touched on the formation and history of Grange Halls in America. We also discussed local Granges here in the Tri-County area, in particular, the Kettle River Grange. Ashley highlights the important role that local Grange Halls have played in helping teach our youth valuable lessons about living and being a part of rural America. If you are interested in joining a Grange Hall, you can reach out to NEWA Granges 509@gmail.com, and they will put you in touch with the right people. I really enjoyed having Ashley on and learning more about our local Grange Halls and their role in our community. People like Ashley and the others involved in the Grange are truly what make this such a special place to live and raise a family. If you found value in our conversation, please help spread the word by sharing this podcast with a friend, and if possible, find a way to help volunteer locally in whatever you may be interested in. Anyone interested in coming on the podcast can reach out to thegrangepodcast@gmail.com. Thanks for tuning in. Now, here's my conversation with Ashley Pratt. The Grange movement, formerly known as the National Grange of the Order of Patrons of Husbandry, was founded in 1867 by Oliver Hudson Kelly. The movement emerged in the post-Civil War era to address the economic and social challenges faced by farmers. Kelly, inspired by his travels through the southern states, recognized the need for agricultural education and cooperation. The Grange was one of the first national organizations to give women equal status as men, allowing them to hold any office and have voting rights. The movement adopted some Masonic-like secret rituals and oaths to foster a sense of unity and fraternity among its members. By the mid-1870s, the Grange had expanded rapidly, with over 800,000 members and thousands of local chapters, known as Granges, across the United States. These chapters established Grange Halls, which served as venues for educational activities, social events, and political meetings. One of the primary goals of the Grange was to promote economic cooperation among farmers, leading to the establishment of cooperative buying and selling enterprises. The Grange played a significant role in advocating for farmers' rights and influenced the passage of the Granger Laws, which regulated railroad and grain elevator rates. Although the political influence of the Grange waned in the late 19th century, many Grange Halls continue to function as community centers, maintaining the organization's legacy of fellowship and service. And that's something I put together researching Grange Halls in America. And here today to talk with me about local Granges here in Stevens County and Ferry County, the Tri-County area, is Ashley Pratt. Ashley, welcome to the Grange.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah. What's going on?
Well, like I said, I was pretty excited to see that the Grange podcast was your name for this.
Yeah.
And I was like, I need to go on that show and let's talk about Grange.
Let's do it.
Yeah. So I guess we've all been to our Grange Halls over the years, right? Since we were kids to today. But I can say that I heavily got involved into the Grange after COVID. So 4-H is a great program, and it's great youth advocacy, for youth in general. But they told us volunteers that if we weren't to get the vaccine, we wouldn't be able to participate as leaders and volunteers. So that kind of gave me a little bit of a shake, because let's face it, everybody had their own opinions about that.
Yeah. And
so Grange Youth, or Junior Grange, was a program, and actually 4-H came from Grange. So Grange Youth transitioned into 4-H as when it was taken on by WSU throughout the state and then overseen it. But anyways, that's another whole story. We had the opportunity to see if maybe the fairs would take Grange Youth into another program like FFA and 4-H. That was a little bit more grassroots and a little less being held, to standards that they wanted us to be held to.
Gotcha.
So in 2021, I think it was actually December of 2020, I went to the Kettle River Grange in Barstow. Mm-hmm. And I asked them, hey, would you be interested in reestablishing the youth program here at the Grange? And they opened their arms to me. They said, come to the next meeting. It happened to be the Christmas meeting that they did. And so it was even cooler that it was part of, the fellowship they had that day. So I got to see it, from the very first time with them in their celebratory of the year for Grange. And I was accepted as the leader, and I started the program. And the first year we had, I believe it was 81 kids that were enrolled.
No way.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
So I got a bunch of questions off of that, mm-hmm. But first I want to just give our listeners kind of a brief 10,000 foot view of you.
Yes.
For all of our friends listening, Ashley Pratt, Ashley Nichols in school, mm-hmm. Just so we can put a face with the name.
Yep.
Before I let you kind of dive into the just growing up here real quick, early life, childhood, my fondest and most memorable memories of you used to work at Sandy's.
Correct.
And this soft serve was on point. I love me some Sandy's ice cream.
Yes.
But you worked there for a while, right?
I worked there when I was 16 and then throughout college. So yeah, I was there for a good solid 6 years on and off. Yeah.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And my brother and I may have kept the lights on there.
You
and
did.
Joe.
I was honestly thinking about that. I'm like, was it your favorite that was like the mayo and barbecue, or is that your dad?
No,
that was.
We both would do.
Yeah. I was like, I actually had a burger last night, and that's what I had on it, was mayo and barbecue. I added pickles, but yeah. That's awesome. I definitely remembered that. Sandy's was a great place to work.
It was. So many good memories there.
If I could give any youth any advice, it would be to work in an industry like
service industry.
Yeah. Yep.
I agree. After I got done with college, I worked and I was a guide, and so it's a little different, but mm-hmm. still in the service industry. I worked mm-hmm. for tips, and what a great life lesson. I agree. I think every youth should go and work in that industry. Just you learn a lot, right? Just school of hard knocks.
Yes. Yeah. You start from the bottom and you work your way up, and you meet all walks of life. And
for sure.
You just learn. You learn how to multitask. You learn how to talk to customers. You learn how to get through something that didn't work out quite so well. I mean, there's so many things that come from being a waitress or, serving like that.
Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
So let's just, like I said, give me the 10,000 foot view. You grew up here. Were you a 12-year senior?
I was not a 12-year senior. Okay. So I was born in San Luis Obispo, California.
Whoa.
In 1986.
Did not know this.
Yeah. And my grandparents moved to this area in, I believe, 94. It might be 91, to Orient.
Okay.
My grandpa was a logger in Idaho. They lived in Orfino, Idaho. Yep. And the boom was kind of happening up here, so they moved up here. And then about 3 years later, a lot of their kids and we all followed. So James and I grew, James is my cousin, a year younger than me. We grew up very close, almost like brother and sister. And so when we all ended up here, It was basically my mom, we did move around a lot. So every year it felt like we moved around a lot. And I remember when we moved here, I told her if she wanted to move again, I was staying with Grandma and Grandpa.
And was your first stop Orient?
Orient was where my grandparents were,
Yeah.
but when my first stop is currently where James lives now, which was my grandparents' place on Boise.
I didn't know
Sanders.
that.
Yeah.
Okay.
So back behind Boise,
Yeah.
that's where most of our childhood,
That's a cool
memories
place.
start. It is a
Yeah.
very cool place.
Awesome.
I'm glad it stayed in the family.
And so how old are you when you get here?
I am third grade.
Okay. And what's that like?
It was great, actually.
Was it?
I came from a small town in Eugene, Oregon, Junction City. Cheshire, actually, get even smaller. My mom worked at a livestock auction there.
Really? What did she do?
She was she did like the books and the accounting portion, payroll, all of that. So my childhood in those days on Saturdays was sale day. I had matching cowgirl outfit with my mom. I was running around the stockyards everywhere. I mean, I think about some of that today. That's scary. I mean, and before that, she was in Portland before the Portland livestock auction burnt down. So that's my childhood, it was my mom and I growing up. So, but when I was in first grade, James's mom and dad, my mom and I, we all lived together. So that was even cooler.
Okay.
That was in Hillsboro, Oregon. And then after that was when we moved up here.
What's the connection with James? Is your mom and...
My mom and his mom are sisters.
Gotcha. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Yeah.
And who's your third grade teacher in Kettle Falls?
My third grade teacher was Mrs. Berg, but actually Mrs. Potestio.
Yep. Nice.
Sydney. Yeah. And I loved her. She was my favorite teacher.
McKinley just had her
Did
2
she?
years ago and loved her. And my brother had her in third grade and loved her as well. So.
Yes. And then I had Mrs. Haley for fourth grade, which not everybody loved Mrs. Haley. Everybody wanted Mr. Morgan.
I had Mr. Morgan and loved him. I have a soft spot for Mrs. Haley. She was, you just had to crack the shell, right?
I did.
She was a super nice lady,
She
came
was.
across pretty gruff. And remember the OJ Bronco that she drove? She had a white, like a 96 white Bronco
I
that
do
looked
not
just like
remember.
OJ's. Yeah. And I remember she would like drive that thing and I was like, that car does not fit you. But
That's not. I never pictured that was what she drove.
Yeah.
I didn't realize that.
I was pumped to have Morgan. No regrets. Still my favorite teacher to this day.
I still like seeing
And
him.
I'm hoping to have him on this podcast because I think that would be great.
That would be amazing.
But yeah, shout out to Mrs. Haley as well.
Yes.
She was good.
I liked her, but she was a rough one for some.
I think Shada was in that too, right?
I think Shada and I were in the
I
same.
feel like
yeah.
Shada's talked about
Shada
Mrs.
and I
Haley.
probably had our little side mini cheer camp that we did and made t-shirts for. Oh my gosh, I'm really taking it back.
But there was no rough transition coming into a new school, third
No,
grade.
because I came from a huge school like Hillsboro. That was huge.
Yeah.
And this was smaller and it felt better.
Gotcha.
That's probably why I told my mom, you move again, I'm staying.
Yeah.
Like I'm going to stay with my grandparents.
So then coming up through school, are you involved in FFA or 4-H? Are you
Nope.
doing any of that when you're in school?
I was not involved in any of that. So, I mean, I was involved in, ASB and volleyball. I did, I would go to all the after school activities. But no, I was not involved in fair. I was envious of those kids. And I grew up with, like I said, in a livestock, atmosphere with my mom. And I had horses when I first moved here. I didn't end up riding them enough that we ended up selling them, but I was envious of those kids in FFA and 4-H that had the abilities to go to fair.
Yeah.
But I would go visit like Rick and Richard in Ferry County at the Republic Fair. It was that was the fair to go to.
Yeah, for sure.
And Leona would, have to make sure who's covering Sandy's, because like all of us girls and all, Sandra and Tasha and all of us were ready to go to the fair because that was the best thing at the end of the summer.
Yeah, for sure.
So, and we always made it work, whether we were driving over there at 10 o'clock at night or whatnot, we still made it work. But
that's awesome.
Good memories.
So get done with school. And then what was after that? What was after high school for you?
So after high school, I went to Cheney to Eastern.
Okay.
I was not, they pushed college pretty heavily, right?
Yeah.
It wasn't a great fit for me.
Yep.
That was a huge change, like, bigger school. And I was at a place in my life where I was kind of lost a little bit, and it wasn't a great fit. Like I said, I grew up with just my mom, and I had a friend, Chance's mom, actually, Peggy.
Oh, yeah.
She helped me figure out where my dad was.
Okay.
But we didn't have Facebook to look things up. You could like do people searches and figure it out. But that was always something that was really missing for me, was not knowing that side of me.
Okay.
And so she helped me, and I dropped a letter in the mail to my dad, to my uncle, and I don't know if I did a third letter, but I know those two went out. And my dad had lived in Brookings, Oregon at the time, and he had survived cancer when he shouldn't have. And he owned a little fish shack, and he was well known in the neighborhood.
Wow.
Our community there. And I didn't have the right address, but the postmaster knew who he was and got it to him. And he got a hold of me.
No way.
Mm-hmm.
And so you're in your early 20s or late
Early
teens?
20s.
Okay.
I was 21, actually.
Wow. And
I might have been about 20 when I started talking to him, but I was 21 when I physically met him.
Did you have any recollection as a child? No.
Nope. We really didn't have anything, and there was reasons for that.
Yeah.
I never understood it until I got older and
For
looked, met him and understood it all. But I think that's hard for a girl to not know who her dad is.
I would imagine.
Or have a connection or have a father figure. My grandpa was really close, but it wasn't the same.
Yeah.
So my mom lived in Newport, Oregon at the time. Or Waldport, actually. So my mom, when I graduated from high school, before I even left for college, she had left for Yachats, Oregon. She took a job at Angel Job Corps. So she'd worked at Curly Job Corps when I was in high school here, and then she moved. And so at that point, once, she was down there and he was in Brookings, I went to visit my mom, and she drove me and dropped me off to meet my dad. And so I hung out with him for that whole day, and I can admit I was 21, and to ease the anxiety, I just had some drinks with him because that was the way I could do it. But
yeah,
I met him then, and we kind of had a relationship. We at least talked. I got to know him. He got to know me. It closed that hole I needed to close.
That's cool.
It was cool. It was good.
Good for you.
And I know that not everybody gets to do that.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, my dad succumbed to bad choices, and he died of a meth overdose when Riley was really young.
Oh, no. Yeah.
It all worked out. And like I said, hindsight, my mom did the right things, but
yeah. Well, at least you had the closure piece, right?
Yeah. I totally did.
Good for you.
And it's one of those things that you probably knew none of this about me.
No, not much.
And
like I said, I was trying to reflect, and there was a big enough age gap in us in school that, like I said, the ice cream machine was I feel like that's where you and I talked the most, was at Sandy's. Yeah. Just being a freshman to a senior is a big age gap.
If your dad would come see me, I worked at the casino at Northern Quest Casino in the buffet.
When I was at Reardon.
Yes.
He told me that.
Yes.
Yeah.
He used to stop in and see me.
I forgot about that.
He did. He would ask to sit in my section, and he'd always leave me $100 tip because that's who Eric was. And I was so thankful for that every time. But
I totally spaced that.
He did. He would stop in and see me every now and then.
Awesome.
Check in on me. How you doing? You know, I appreciated that.
Yeah.
Those people were important. And this was before I connected with my dad. So those connections, those people that reach out and they don't know it at the time, but it's important.
That's cool.
So thanks,
awesome.
Eric, if you're listening.
So did you end up finishing Eastern?
I did not. So I ended up moving to Point Roberts with Kevin.
Okay.
And Chance wasn't there at the time. But anyways, I moved over there, and then I worked at a bank and kind of just got my feet back under me. College wasn't the thing for me at the time.
Yeah.
I just wasn't finding my groove.
Yep.
And do I regret it? No. Do I wish that I would have been in a different place when I started college? Probably yes. And then it would have fallen where it was. But I think everything happens for a reason.
Yeah.
So for me, it all worked out. But that college debt is just crazy. Even for the little bit I was there, it just is crazy.
Yeah. I feel for kids right now. And hopefully we're doing due diligence with teaching our youth and having them understand finance, because it's for a lot of people that's something that you get buried by the time you're 23, and good luck getting out from underneath that, which seems criminal.
Yeah. And I don't think we had a whole lot of support. And I mean, our system just wasn't set up for that.
Yeah.
We just were pushed heavily on where are you going? Where are you going?
Yeah.
And that's something I try to remind my kids, you know, technical schools and figure out what you want to do is sometimes better than just diving right in.
Yeah. I always thought it was interesting, you know, that there's other countries that take a gap year, you know, right out of high school.
Mm-hmm.
Coming from, you know, how we were raised and in this country, I was like, what a bunch of idiots.
Yeah.
You know, like they're lazy and they're just going to go like part in them. But now as an adult, like, you know, I talk with my oldest about this and I'm like, I think there's a ton of value just to go out and live, you know, get a few different jobs, move around. Like, I think there's a ton of value in that. Because at 18, what do you know?
You don't.
You
And
don't know
even
anything.
know what's out there.
And so then how are you supposed to know what you want to do for the rest of your life and then take this huge financial liability to maybe pursue that? Like, I think being able to, and then the cool thing too, with like going out and living or maybe getting better at a trade is you can always fall back on that.
Yeah.
You know, if you know how to do something, now you're an asset,
Right.
Whatever that is.
Exactly.
You know?
Exactly. No, I think taking a year or just figuring that out or even job shadowing somebody for a little bit, you're going to find out real fast if that's something you can handle or you can't handle, you know, and
I did that in college. So I did go to college, felt a little pressure. Both my parents did not go to college. And I was very fortunate that I had the opportunity to go without debt, you know, so that was very fortunate for that. But I remember going in and I actually, the counselor at Reardon, Matt Balance, which is his dad taught here. I just ran into his dad the other day, taught my dad. But I was like, Matt, I don't know what I want to do. And he's like, well, go study something that you enjoy. Because I didn't like math or history or science. And I was like, well, I like talking to people. And he's like, well, go into psychology. And I'm like, okay. So I went into psychology. And my second year, I did an internship. I was in Montana and I got an internship with the Center for Mental Health, which was a state-funded mental health agency. And so I got to work with youth that had mental health disabilities and then also their parents. So in the summer, I ran a program of 8 to 12 kids that I would spend the day with them, like in this kind of summer program thing.
Right.
And then during the school year, I had 4 kids that I would spend time with weekly and then also be in their house, kind of like working with them as a family.
Mm-hmm.
And I realized that that was not the field for me. Like, I actually loved being around the kids and I still love psychology. It's fascinating to me.
Mm-hmm.
I read a lot about it. But I could not leave the job at the end of the day. Like, I brought a lot of that grief home and then I was super frustrated with the system. Like, I didn't feel that they were getting the real help they needed.
Right.
One of my biggest issues being that I felt all my kids were over medicated. Like, most of my kids were 13 and under and on a dozen medications. And so I wrote I ended up getting a degree in psychology. And I wrote my final paper my senior year and it was called Hugs, Not Drugs. And it was on a wilderness therapy program. Because I felt like, and then we were asking the parents to basically play doctor and administer, you know, their medication. And the parents also, not all of them, but the majority of them were also seeking mental health treatment. And so like sometimes they're over medicated, other days they're under medicated. And it was just super sad because like I did feel that throughout the summer, just by engaging and being with them outside and doing things, like I could see some kind of improvement or structure, you know, like I think kids need structure,
they really
you know,
do.
And anyways, a little bit of a tangent there, but I was so thankful that I had the opportunity for that internship because would I have not had that, I would have went and got a master's degree and then, you know, did the whole thing and probably burnt out by year 3 or 4 and then been like, what? So I actually went and then grabbed a business degree as well and just figured I could fall back on that.
Right.
With no intent of coming back to Kettle Falls, Washington and running a tugboat business, but here I am.
Yeah, I was, I knew you went off to college and then when I heard you had come back and you were, you know, working with your dad, I was like, Well, that's cool.
Yeah, I wouldn't have
But you wouldn't
thought
have
that.
dreamt it for yourself.
And I think I've mentioned this before, maybe on here, but like it really took me leaving here to appreciate it. You know,
Same.
when I was 18, I was ready to check out. I was very frustrated with this place and thought it was a one horse town. And like, I don't feel that way now. Like, I mean, I love this place and being able to choose to be here, and, you know,
It's a gem.
I had to go live, you know, I lived in Montana and Colorado. I took a traveling road job for a while, and I was like, I'm fine with back home. It's a good place. The people are good, and it's not perfect, and nowhere is, but it's a good place.
It really is.
Yeah.
And it's by far one of the most gorgeous places, I think.
We're so lucky.
We are truly blessed. And
Yeah.
I mean, we got to keep this kind of a secret. We can't really let everybody in. But no, you don't appreciate it until you leave. And that's how I was. And once I was pregnant with Riley, and I was like, I want to go back home.
Yeah.
Like, I want to be closer to home.
So how old are you when you get back?
I am 22.
Okay. And have you already had Riley at this point?
Nope,
or are you pregnant?
I was pregnant with Riley when
Okay.
I come back. And I went back to Sandy's, and I worked there until I literally couldn't hit the grill anymore. So Leona graciously took me back because I just needed a job, and I knew that I could swing right into that. So yeah.
And then you've basically been here since?
I have been here since.
Okay, cool.
Yep.
And 2 kids?
2 kids.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And so maybe now, you know, we can transition a little bit, but I don't know much. I'm going to take a minute here and just explain the name of the podcast for me. I always remember seeing Grange Halls in the Tri-County area, right? You go for a drive outside of city limits and you're going to see a Grange Hall.
Mm-hmm.
And I loved, actually, my first memory is the Kettle River Grange. My dad has always been pretty good friends with Jerry Hearn in Carolyn. And I remember probably being in grade school and going and watching one of their plays. Jerry had invited us up to watch a play. And I didn't know if I was into plays or not, but it was really cool. It was fascinating to watch Jerry act because I'd been on 4-wheeler rides with him, and, you know, I had known him, but then seeing him on stage was incredible. He was so good at it.
Yeah.
And so I guess that's my first memories of the, you know, Grange Halls around here. But I guess maybe back to the COVID era, I think 2020 is when I first started attending school board meetings. I'd never been to a school board meeting before. And I was very interested in what we were doing for school safety. I felt like we were leaving that on the table. You know, when we were there, right, we had Brenda Lamica as a resource officer. I even think Roger Gillespie was there for a minute. We had Mike Fisher. You know, there was always
Presence.
there was
Great presence. Those
yeah.
were all,
I mean, Lamica was the best.
She
she
really was.
so good at building relationships, and she was so vital. I felt like in our years there, I loved her.
I have a funny Brenda story.
Let's hear it.
So I was leaving for school, and I was racing somebody to get to school. And so I went, you know, I didn't want to catch the train on the tracks, so I went the back way, you know, past Singers and up. And I was on the stretch of Old Kettle between the highway and the high school 4-way. And I was going a little too fast. She pulled me over. Oh, I'm definitely not winning today. I didn't. She's like, why are you speeding? And first I'm like, you know, just trying to get to school, and I might be trying to get there for somebody else. And she's like, do you know why you shouldn't be speeding in this area? And I looked at her and she goes, I'm going to stop you there. I'm not going to write you a ticket, but I want you to write me an essay on why you shouldn't be speeding in this area. And I think it had to be 3 paragraphs or so. It might have been even words. I'm not even how many words it needed to be, but I wrote it. I gave it to her, and she's like, so now you understand why you shouldn't be, you know, speeding through here. And I was like, oh, thank goodness, because my mom would have, you know,
for sure.
I had to pay for my own insurance, but if I had got a ticket, I'd had to pay for that too. So for sure, I didn't want her to take my car away because I got a ticket. So
she was so good at building a relationship with, you know, if you're just raised, and it's a little different for us being small town, but like if you just are raised and you see cops on movies and stuff, like you're not sure where you're at with them. Like it's kind of intimidating. Like Lamica did such a good job of like, I'm your friend. I'm a person. yes, I have a gun and a badge, but she never had that identity and she treated you as a person. And she was so cool with, I think, building for our whole generation because we are rural kids and we're going to break all the laws. I mean, that's part of it. And she
Yes.
didn't let it get out of hand, but she also let us be kids in small town America, which I think there's a ton of value in that.
Yeah. And she just made you think about why there's a rule.
Mm-hmm.
Think about if, somebody was on the road and it's a school zone and you're driving a little too fast and you can't stop. So, yes, she was very good at making you understand why, but not being too hard on you and being a human.
Yeah, for sure.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, she was a great lady.
And now I have her great nephews in my Grange youth.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh, that's cool.
So
full circle.
It is full circle.
Yeah. So I start going to these school board meetings and I don't remember what the aha moment was, but it was sometime in that time frame where I've always been a very critical person of things that I don't think are going right. And I realized that I was being critical without a solution. Like it was just easy to always point the finger at what everyone else was doing wrong, but never was I being part of an actionable solution. And so I just went to the school board meetings thinking, I'm going to see how this works. Like I need to get educated. My kids are in the school. And let me tell you, to show up at school board meetings during the COVID era, wow, that was wild. Those were some crazy meetings. I was like, is this how they always are? And they're like, no, usually there's 4 people here. Nothing's going on.
So how many were in attendance, would you say, when you started going?
Well, the first time I went was a boilerplate topic meeting over COVID. And so there was probably 35 to 40 people there. It wasn't the crazy one that made the news. It was a few before that. And then it was interesting. It's what I call the pitchfork mentality. When shit ends up at your doorstep, then people show up with pitchforks, which I can see value in that. I don't always think that's the best route to go.
Right.
I think you should be more involved consistently than just showing up with pitchforks. But I can also see, I don't know, I see both sides of it, I guess. But the other times that it wasn't a huge topic meeting, and still to this day, there's 3 or 4 people. They're not well attended.
Right.
And so I went to 1 or 2 just an observation, and then I started speaking at them. You get 3 minutes, and I was just asking questions about school safety, and I was able to learn how to kind of read the budget and see where funds are allocated, and asking questions. And then I was able to make a lot of good contacts with other schools that had implemented school resource officers. And so then I was actually then presenting information that I'd learned and saying, hey, these other schools are doing it. I was met not really at Kettle. I was not met with resistance, but even from some of our local representatives, saying, yeah, you'll never see a gun in a school in the state of Washington. And if I would have just taken no for an answer on that, which was pretty believable, I'm like, oh yeah, I get it, whatever. But then, like I said, I started researching these other schools, and there was quite a few schools on our side of the state that were implementing this safety thing. And so I guess where I'm going with all this was I got to have a lot of hours of I went to 24 straight school board meetings, which is 2 years. I didn't miss one. And so I got to do a lot of observing. And what I observed is that I still believe that people are inherently good, but we're siloed off. And so I think that because people and foundations, operate in these silos, there's no space for transparency. And so then where on one hand, I think that people are inherently good, I also think it's human nature to assume the worst. And I think that's just kind of a quality that we all have that isn't favorable. And so when there's no transparent communication, then people assume the worst. And then that's the friction that I think I felt at a lot of school board meetings. I think at the end of the day, if you could get the majority of people, I think they all probably agree and align to some point. But because of the silo effect, there becomes a lot of assuming and then assuming the worst in others. And so that was just an observation that I had. And then also I was working with Kettle Falls Police Department. So I started attending city hall meetings, and it was the same thing. The city hall meetings and the school board meetings were very similar in nature. Big, tall silos, people assuming the worst, and then friction based off of that. And so it seemed very counterproductive. Like I felt that people on both sides of the aisle would bring valid concerns, but because of the friction point, the needle never got moved. And I just like remember sitting in so many of those feeling frustrated of like, man, I could be at home right now with my family, but I'm here and we're not really moving the needle. We're just, everyone wants to be heard. And most of that is coming from emotion, you know, not much of it's coming from a logical frame of mind. And so, you know, this was 2 or 3 years, and that's a whole different conversation, you know, with the school board and the security program. I was really thankful for what was able to get accomplished there. It took a while, and there was lots of ups and downs during that. But at the end of the day, I feel that we have a cool safety program at Kettle Falls now, and that only happened with community and school and faculty support, which was cool to see everyone come together during a very polarizing time. It was kind of the one thing that everyone could agree on,
right?
Which was great.
And it was a great move. Like that needed to be done much sooner, but at least it got done, right?
Yeah.
You started it, you got it there. And I think a lot of the schools around followed suit.
Yeah. And I was just thankful for, I mean, it was a very collaborative effort, you know, and that was really neat. But I think what I took away from it was, I think maybe because of technology, you know, is one. And then also I feel that, and not to fault anyone, but it just when things get bigger, when establishments get bigger, the silo effect happens more often. And I think especially in small towns, like, and probably also on a macro level in government, but like is this idea of checks and balances. And I think that's a good thing.
It really is.
When it's done the right way with good intent. Right now, our checks and balances is more of like, I point a finger at you and you point it back and we get frustrated with each other. And that doesn't work. But actually like being able to sit at a table and me be able to hear you, you hear me, and then try to come up with a decision that's for the greater good. That's going to require me to compromise. It's going to require you to compromise. But if we can keep the greater good, which I think, like I said, back to people being inherently good, I do think they want the greater good for the people. There's just a lot that gets in the way of that. And so I got to thinking, I drove by a Grange Hall and I was like, what was the purpose of the Grange? You know, like what were these things? And I'm a very random person. And so like, if you could see my Google search history, it's all over the map. And so I start reading about Grange Halls, and, you know, I felt like this little summary, I just put this together last minute, but the way that I understood it, that kind of had this light bulb effect for me, was Grange Halls were stood up after the Civil War and in the Midwest due to a drought and hard economic times. And so like farmers in particular were having a tough time yielding crop due to this drought and the repercussions of the Civil War. And so these Grange Halls were stood up as a place of gathering to be able to share information. You know, so if you knew how to do pigs and I could do cows, and, you know, Joe McBride's over there knowing how to do wheat, we're coming together, and all of a sudden, like, we're depending on each other for survival and our families. And you're teaching me pigs, I'm teaching you beef, and Joe's doing wheat, you know, and we're like working together. And I think that a lot of that has gone away due to technology. And on one hand, I love technology and it's awesome, but it comes at this cost of, like, I depend on the UPS driver now, that he comes with the Amazon order. Like, you and I aren't trading meat anymore, right?
Right.
And so as I was researching this idea of the Grange, I was like, wow, like, we're so far from that. But the original intent, what a beautiful thing. Like, I could really see the tribe aspect of that and the community in that. And so I was getting a little bit spun out at the city hall and the school board meetings, and I needed to take a break from that. And I thought, well, I wonder if a podcast could be able to maybe bridge that gap. And so, like, my idea with the Grange podcast is a modern approach to what Grange Halls used to be, to say, let's share information.
Yep.
Let's talk. I am looking forward to agree to disagree with people. I would love to have people on your side of the table that maybe I don't understand or agree with, but my intent would want to be, I want to understand why you think the way you think.
Right.
And then I would love for listeners to be able to form their own opinion based on the information presented or communicated.
That's passed across the table.
And I think the thing that we need to remember is you and I don't have much influence on a macro level. You and I can talk about the presidential election and all of these policies till we're purple in the face, and it doesn't really move the needle. But we do kind of have, we do have input on where we live. And we need to be informed voters. We need people for public office to show up with the people's best interest. And we need to have checks and balances. And I think we've gone away from that. And so this Grange podcast idea is my attempt to possibly share information again, and then inform people in our community. And then hopefully that grows to involvement. Because one of the critiques that I have, like I said, it's super easy to critique City Hall and the school and say they're the problem. But my biggest critique is the people not being involved. And we need to be involved again. Instead of always playing victim and saying, they're in the wrong. We need to take ownership as this is our community. These are our people, and not with tunnel vision, with open-mindedness. And say, we can actually move the needle here. Like, how does your back 40 look? Like, before you worry about your neighbors and what's going on in the world, like, are your ducks in a row? And so that was a very long-winded explanation of kind of like how I came up with the idea of the name, the Grange Podcast. But what I'm really interested to chat with you about is I don't know anything about our local Granges. Like, and I say this respectfully, but I haven't been in one in many years, 15, 20 years. But it seems like it's and again, this is just my 2 cents, but it's like kind of an old dusty building that they do a pie sale in a couple times a year, or old people play bingo in. And I don't know if that's true or not, but like that's when you reached out to me, I thought, and I didn't even know what your involvement is, and I still don't, like in Granges, but I would love to just have this kind of like conversation and learn more about what our Grange is doing locally, and like kind of get a thumb on it. When you just told me that there's 80 members, is that what you said?
80 youth kids.
80 youth kids?
When I first started it, yes.
I would have lost that bet.
You would have lost it. What would you have guessed?
I would have said 10.
10.
Yeah.
Yeah.
At most.
And honestly, we just had our open enrollment is from January 1st to March 31st for these kids. So we got another month of open enrollment. And right now I think I'm sitting at 55 kids.
So enrolled. Can we break that down real quick? Mm-hmm. I'm going to just kind of, as you bring something up, I'm just going to kind of like systematically break it down. But the enrollment thing, what is that process? And then what comes with enrollment?
Okay. So, first I'm going to go back just one more step too. So, the reason I reached out to you is I did want to come talk about Grange because I believe we can keep it going. We need new blood.
Okay.
That's you and me.
Yeah.
That's us younger ones. And we're not even that young. But the people that run these Granges, they're tired. Mm-hmm. But they have been in these Granges for years.
Yeah.
They remember it from their parents and their grandparents and their aunts and their uncles. These are, community grassroots places.
Yeah.
To go. And yes, for bingo. My mom is part of the Fort Colville Grange. She's a secretary and the treasurer. She runs bingo there. Mm-hmm. And she kind of just got thrown into it because I got involved with Grange and then they needed help. And there's Jane Deerdorf and her sister Denise that are there and they run, help run the Fort Colville Grange. And then I'm part of the Kettle River Grange. And when I moved back, I lived right below that Grange.
Okay.
When we first moved back here in 2008, right below. And then we had that huge windstorm and the fire came through. I lived in a place that Kelly Rucker owned.
Okay.
And so we ended up moving here to town, but I was right there in the backyard of Grange. And so now I drive 45 minutes to my Grange, but it's important. But you're right. It's, so let's go back to enrollment. So I'll take it back. So enrollment is, like I said, January 1st through March 31st. And it's pretty simple. You show up to a meeting, you tell me you want to become a part of it. The kids, run the meetings. We have a master and we have an overseer, which is like a vice president. We have a secretary and a treasurer. We have gatekeepers.
Are these voted on?
These are voted on by the kids. Yep.
Cool.
So they run it just like they should, like a formal, meeting, just like when the Grange meetings I participate in is the same thing. We vote on our leaders, and we have those every month. Every Friday at 7:00 is the Kettle River Grange meeting at the first of the month. First of the month. And then for the Junior Grange, it's so confusing because we are using terms that come from so many years back, and Grange is kind of still, because it's kind of blown up since 2020 and 2021, these youth programs in the Grange, it's become big. It was moving at lightning speed, and we are using like old packets from the 1970s out of California and Washington State Grange. We had to come together and collaboratively come up with some newer, modern project books and things for the kids to make sure that we are like up to par, basically. The first year we did it, project books are required for these kids to show in the fair. It is a state Grange rule. So they have to keep track of their projects for animals. So they're keeping track of how much, they're spending in feed and how much their animal costs. And if they had to go to the vet, and they're tracking how much it's costing them versus when they go to sell. Are they making what they're putting in? Yeah. So, which is a great thing, right? Where you and I are going back to those, what are we being taught in school to show, income versus spending versus,
Can't live in the red.
Can't live in the red. Yeah. So anyways, these project books were required, but they were so inundated and so complicated. I try to give this to a 6, 7, 8-year-old. It's like, my mom's basically got to help me fill this out because it was crazy. So I've actually been on a team, I guess actually last wrestling season, I would go sit in my car on a Zoom with the leaders across Washington State Youth Fairs program, and we were collectively coming up with a new modern project book for these kids. And it is available now on the Washington State Grange website. But
so is that project book something they work on throughout the year?
Yes. So as soon as they enroll, usually about March or April, I'm going to start handing those out to the kids, and they're going to start working on it for their projects. Okay. Mm-hmm.
Is there any cost associated with enrollment?
So enrollment is kind of based on each Grange. So in the beginning, it was free. Okay. We had $0. If you are a adult, or in Grange, it's a little different. So 13 and a half and above, you become a subordinate Grange member. So those kids need to pay a $25 fee to become a part of the Grange, and that kind of envelopes into the Junior Grange, Youth Grange program. Or there's a family membership where it's 2 adult costs, so $92, and then all of the kids fall underneath that. So if the parents are part of the Grange, then they're under the family membership and there's no dues. At least at my Grange, that's how that falls. Okay. Right now, we did do a $5 enrollment for new kids just because we were able to raise funds and buy t-shirts. And so for the new kids, that helps them get a t-shirt into our program. So we've done a lot of fundraising. You've seen us probably in the Town and Country Days parade. We are usually at the rodeo. We do the big tree contest, which brings in money, and that's at the Colville, the Northeast Washington Fair. We do a lot of different fundraising so that we can, fund this, because 4-H program, they are provided all that. These kids are paying for that paper being printed, those packets, those project books. These kids are paying for that with the funds that they raise. Hopefully someday that'll change and it's going to be, be able to be provided at a different level for them. But for right now, they are taking on those costs.
Is it required, we're bouncing around a little bit, but is it required to raise an animal if you're in Junior Grange?
Nope. You can do a sewing project. You can do a lot of different projects. You can participate in the fair.
What do you think the split is, of your kids now? How many of them are showing animals at the...
I'd say 85% are showing animals.
Is there an opportunity or an option if a kid wants to, raise an animal for the fair, but doesn't, maybe they live in town, and you can't raise a pig in town.
Right.
Are there options for that?
Yeah. So if they have a family member or a friend, they, have a friend doing it, they can also help, they can raise their animal with them if, the permissions are there and everybody agrees.
Yeah.
Then that's totally
Cool.
doable.
And what are you guys meeting as a junior Grange one day a month as well?
Yes.
And what's that meeting look like? How long is it, and what are you doing in that time?
Those meetings are usually an hour to 2, and those are mostly I would call that our general meeting. The kids are coming up with what fundraisers they want to participate in. We're coming up with projects that we're working on, or, if we're getting ready for the fair. Like right now, I'm asking everybody, you have your animals, and they are coming up with the fundraisers they wanted to do this year. I don't think we're participating in the Town and Country Day Parade because it costs them, for candy, it's a lot of money. So it's like $600 to $800 just for us to participate. And that's just like a community service basically for them. It's not like, and we were doing it to, show our faces, and we were newer, and, this is the Grange name, the Kettle River Grange youth is new, and we want to put faces to the kids that are there in the ring selling their animals. So we definitely have participated in that the last 2 or 3 years, I believe. We were able to buy a cargo trailer this last winter so that all of their totes and their supplies, their stanchion stations, the things that they've raised to decorate their stuff at the fair can be in one spot and then be easily accessed for them, when they're at the fair, rather than it being with this project leader and this project leader. So that was kind of exciting, but it kind of depleted the fund. So we're kind of going to have to work our way back up again. But I feel like that was a good investment for them, because it can be passed on to the next generation.
For sure. So would you take a minute and just in a nutshell kind of describe the full meal deal from getting an animal, you're 12 years old, and you maybe use your kids as an example. They get an animal with the intent of taking it to the fair, which this fair that we're speaking of is the one in Colville. And just kind of from day one to then when they sell it, the intent, just kind of, describe that process to someone that has no idea what that entails and what the reasoning for that is.
Right. And like I described to you earlier, I was not involved in this. I learned with my kids as we went. So my daughter started with a bunny when she was 2. She wasn't even old enough to be in 4-H or anything. She was an open. And we started at the Ferry County Fair, and we worked our way up. So rabbits, chickens, goats was our first market animal.
Okay.
And then we ended up in pigs. So if you're raising a steer, you have to own it for 120 days before the fair starts. So these kids have to have that steer in their possession here middle of April. But a steer, when it's sold, is about 18 months old. I don't know all my steer quotes, so don't quote me completely, but I believe they're about 18 months. So these kids sometimes pick them out as calves, and they take them and show them, if they weren't quite old enough to sell, they might take them as a bottle, a calf, and then bring it back the next year as actually selling it. But anyways, they have to own this project for 120 days if it's steer and equine, horses, horse project. Sheep, goats, and swine are 60 days. So those kids truly don't have to have them until June. But most breeders are probably, which I'm also one of those. So I'm dropping piglets as we speak. And we're right at the tail end of it, truly. And so most of us breeders want to get rid of those around spring break. And that's when the kids start raising them.
Okay.
So typically, I don't know the cost of a steer, but I know it's a lot.
Yeah.
I don't know what it is truly to this day, but we're probably in the thousands and up.
Yep.
For that project. For a pig, you're anywhere from about 200 to 500, 600, I've heard, which is crazy because these kids are not going to make any money if they're in that higher range of 600 for selling a pig at Colville. Okay. It's not going to get there. So they get that project, they're raising it out. And so a pig is, it's pretty simple because I say that lightly. You don't have to own it all year, right? You're just doing the summer months with it. So feeding it every day, twice a day, usually. Fresh water. Pigs are really hard in the heat. They get hot. So these kids are out there feeding, taking care of, raising this animal. And then it gets to the point where they're training it, they're teaching it to lead. If you've seen the fair, it's not like there's a leash on them. They're out there with a whip, walking a pig. And so there's a lot of practice that goes into that. If you want to be successful in the ring, you're doing that pretty early.
Okay.
And then, the hot months get in there and it's hard to get them to gain weight. And then you start playing that game, like making sure they're staying cool and taking care of them and getting them to that 230 to 300 pound mark.
Okay. So they need to be in that range to be able to show up to the fair.
Yes.
Okay.
To sell at the fair. So if you were underweight, you could still show up and show your pig and do all the things, but you wouldn't be able to sell it.
Yeah. Gotcha. Mm-hmm. So then fair happens. When is that? Is that August?
Yep. August. It's usually the almost last week of August. So Republic Ferry County is always Labor Day weekend and Colville Fair is the week before that.
Okay.
So they're back to back, but
yeah.
So the Clayton and the Northeast Washington Fair at the same times too.
And so they call that the actual fat sale, right? Which is when the kids go and present their animal. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And so the kids are dressed up, right? Mm-hmm. Seems like I see a lot of blue jeans and button-down shirts tucked in.
Yep.
The kids look well presented.
Yes.
The animals always look very clean and put up. And then they're essentially showing them to a group of bidders.
Mm-hmm.
And then that's their opportunity to make that money back, right?
Right.
And that they have the upfront costs of the feed and the fencing and all the overhead that it takes to raise this animal. And then they have their time. And then they're hoping that they show well and that we have community members and business, people here. And it seems like, and maybe correct me if I'm wrong, that's pretty well supported. I feel like I'm always amazed at the numbers at the end of the year.
Yeah.
We show up well here, don't we?
We do. We get a lot of support. And we are very fortunate in that these businesses do continue to buy these animals because it's further than just bringing meat home. These kids have worked so hard on these projects. And if it teaches a kid anything, it's perseverance. It's working through hardships. Mm-hmm. It's working through things that might not turn out your way.
Yeah.
And not giving up and just continuing to go. In 2020 is when I decided to keep the kids as female hogs because I wasn't sure we were going to get to go to a sale. And I decided to start breeding because I had trouble finding piglets for my kids.
Okay.
And I was like, I had somebody that said, Ashley, you should breed these. And I'm thinking, maybe I should. And then I tell my husband and he's like, you want to do what?
You're crazy.
Literally. You want to keep them over winter?
Yeah.
You realize where we live, right? And if you want to make $1 million raising hogs, just maybe turn around and go the other way.
For sure.
But I could never put a price tag on the value that it's taught my family and our kids.
Yeah.
I really couldn't. There's super big days where we're like, why do we do this? Why? But then I see them out in the show ring and I see the other kids out in the show ring and I see the community of those 3 days of fair where we're all one big team.
Yeah.
And we're just pushing through, the heat, the stress, the fun times. But the end of the day, those kids, they've worked really hard and they get to take home the prize.
Yeah.
They do. It's crazy to me that we aren't quite at the same rate of sale as some other places. I've seen where a pig will go for $10,000.
Yeah.
That's crazy. But it's a good tax write-off if you're a business.
Yeah.
So, there's places that can do that, but so to circle back, they're raising these projects up. They start in the spring, like I said. And, for steers, they're having to walk those steers continually to make sure they're going to cooperate in the ring. And it is without fail that when we get to the fair, that train's going to roll by and everybody goes crazy in the pig barn and the steer barn. I'm not sure what's happening down in the sheep barn, but luckily sheep are a little smaller. You can contain them a little better, or the goats, but it gets crazy on those first hauling days and the steers are hearing noises they've never heard before. And it's just a lot that's going on at once. But, if I could say anything to anybody that's listening and you want to be a part of this community and these kids that put in the work, come to your local fairs because they truly do deserve all that support. And there's ways to support without taking home an animal. There's ways to just support it, and it's basically a tax write-off. You're supporting the difference between when it goes to the packer and then like the bid that you go. So let's say the packer says, I'm going to pay 90 cents a pound. So the packer pays 90 cents per, let's say we're going to say a 300-pound hog. So they're going to pay that amount. And then the buyer, if they're just supporting, is going to do the difference. So let's say they bought it for $5 a pound. They're going to pay $4.10 times the 300. And that's their support amount. And then the pig goes on to the next, it goes to the packer and they sell it on their end. Or you can choose to support the whole thing and you get to take home the meat, which is perfect too.
So for our listeners out there and business owners especially, there's this opportunity. Just to recap what Ashley said, there's a floor price that is set. And when she says packer, that's by the big companies that will buy these animals. And then you can choose to bid up the support. And if you choose to just do support, you don't go home with an animal, but you're supporting these kids and this hard work and these lessons learned, which is so valuable. To your point, just show up and watch. Even if you're not in a financial position right now to be able to do that, just show up and support them there. Like it'll make you feel good about living here, just watching it.
Yes.
And then I can speak with my business. For the last 5 years, I've actually kept the animals that I've bought. Forever, we just paid support. And then, I think through COVID and everything, we started, Shad and I started really caring what we're putting in our mouths.
Yeah.
And so I get a steer and a pig at a minimum each year. And it's great eating.
It is.
I mean, it feels good, one, to support these kids. It feels good. It's a really cool feeling to know that we're, that our food is coming locally, and yeah, it's awesome. To your point, if you have a business, there's tax incentive there through this, through a write-off, and you're supporting a great cause. So yeah, I guess I would just, no pun intended, but piggyback what you said and just show up and come watch that for a day or two. It's really, for a lot of years, I used to send, Scott Nielsen worked for me forever, and he would do the buying for our business. And he said, you really got to come see this. I believed in the cause, but I didn't really know much about it. And then it was a year or two ago, I started actually showing up, and it's really incredible.
It really is.
Yeah.
And you can even just support on the back of it. Say you want to just bump a kid $25. You're able to do that too. And I don't think everybody is aware of that.
I just learned that this year. There was a couple kids, I didn't want a goat, but I wanted to support this kid and his efforts in the goat. And so I was able just to donate some money on the back end.
Yeah, it's awesome.
Yeah.
There's so many different ways to be able to support these kids. And we need to advertise that more. We really do need to make sure that you can donate $25 and still be supporting a kid.
Yeah.
I mean, that was a feed bag. So, but if we circle back again to Grange, those meetings are still happening. Those plays are still happening.
Really?
It's actually, I think it's April 10th, 11th, and I think I'm wrong. What's the end of spring break? 7th, 8th, and 9th, somewhere in there. If I was looking at a calendar, but that's when our next play is. Those plays are still happening. And then there's dinner theater, which is on Saturday. And some of our youth kids help serve that. And then we get a tip jar out, and the community's been amazing at supporting us in that way too. It's really neat to go see that those old things that were happening when you could remember, they're still happening. They're still meeting at the table on Friday night, first Friday of every month. They're still working on things behind the scenes, still having craft fairs, still using their buildings for funerals and birthdays and weddings. I mean, you name it, they can be rented. And the Fort Colville Grange, the same way, you can rent the kitchen and the whole shebang. So
what's the primary funding that keeps the lights on? Is that through fundraising?
Yes.
Strictly fundraising?
Yes. those fundraisers that we do, those dinner theaters and stuff, those are what keep the lights on.
Yeah.
And
is there much room after the lights are on? Like, is that a constant struggle?
it is.
Yeah.
It can be, especially in the winter months when we have old unundated systems and old buildings that are not, you know, to the standards of today. These buildings are old. And so we are able to get funds based on need sometimes. So if a Grange in our Pomona is like the Stevens County Granges.
Okay.
And then Ferry County, Kettle River Grange is actually kind of grandfathered in because it's closer over here. It was done many, many years ago. That was decided. So it kind of is part of that.
Yeah.
So like the Grange that sold on like Williams Lake Road years ago, there was money held from that. And so like the Fort Colville Grange or any of the Pomona Granges can say, hey, we have this repair that needs to be made. So they can apply to use some of those funds that were, you know, sold from that building. So
Okay.
there's ways to fix these buildings, but there's a procedure to get it, basically.
For sure.
And
so what ideas do you have, you know, looking forward with, you know, when we started this conversation, you said, and I felt you said anyways, I really appreciate the people that have been there for the last 50 years, but it's also time for transition,
It
right?
really is.
We've got to get new blood in. These people put their shift in. And you're thankful for that. The community's thankful for that. But moving forward, let's just play a scenario that you get some new, younger blood in, and let's just say that you find and allocate more funding. What ideas do you have? Because like I said, and I say this respectfully, but in my brain, it's kind of this old dusty thing, right? Like bingo's, I'm not, you know, it doesn't really resonate. Like, I see this value in teaching our youth, like things, you know, whether that's sewing or animals or, you know, what's in these project books. But like, what ideas do you have to kind of revamp what a Grange Hall is to 2025?
oh boy, that's a good deep question. So one of the things is definitely having enough manpower or woman power, both, to run these establishments.
I'm just real quick. Are you seeing enough manpower? I feel like
the same people show up every time. It's like,
but like literally men. I think I'm a little critical, like at the school board meetings and stuff. Like I feel that we need our dads, you know, of the community and strong men to start showing back up to things. Are you seeing that where you're at, or is it mostly female, or is it split? Like,
it's pretty split, but the men that are there have been there for a long time.
They put their shift in.
Shift in. So I could say, like, for the Kettle River Grange, we run a booth over at Ferry County. So like, whether it be the Indian taco stand, it rotates every year. So Indian taco stand or the hamburger booth or breakfast booth, I think it is. So that rotates, but we have to have the manpower over there to run that for 3 days.
Yeah.
And we don't. We're calling on our, you know, relatives to come in and fill shifts. And unfortunately, like, I'm super busy over there with the youth that not even myself can be in a booth and helping at the same time I want to be.
Yeah.
But we don't even have sometimes enough to fill those shifts to raise the money to keep the lights on.
Yeah.
And is it worth it with the food costs for us to put in the money to put out for the food?
Yeah.
To hope we sell enough to get a little in the bank to keep the lights on.
Gotcha.
So in that aspect, we just don't have enough bodies sometimes. And it's as easy as just volunteering your time for a shift flipping burgers or, you know, waiting on the customers at the counter for a day. And that was one of my main things of wanting to come talk to you too, is let's give back to our community. Like, I feel like, and I say this a lot, if I could get paid for my volunteer hours, I might be a millionaire.
Yeah.
I mean, because I love our community so much, and I had to get to a point where I had to start saying no to things, because once you're giving and you give it your all, then they're like, hey, you should come help do this, or you should come. And I had to just finally say, okay, I got to focus on what I want to focus on and be a part of what I want. So like, yep, Kenham's celebration is coming back this year. Super exciting. I'm so excited for that, which is like Rendezvous Days.
Okay.
They just changed the name. That's coming back in July. And I had somebody reach out to me and was like, hey, you want to be on the committee? And I was like, oh, I would love to be, but I'm already spread pretty thin with my family life and volunteering in Grange. Grange takes up a lot of time. Because I try to be at all those subordinate Grange meetings on Fridays, and then I do our youth one, and then we have project meetings where the kids meet for just their individual projects too. So if they're pig kids, we're going to have a side meeting for the, those. But how do we get more involvement in there is, I guess, people just showing up to meetings and understanding where we have needs. And then maybe we do get to update our buildings, and then it can become part of another big opening for the community.
I think there's this, and I might be off on this, and it might be a poor mindset to take, but like sometimes when I hear, oh, you should come join this committee or volunteer, like I roll my eyes and I'm like, committees, nothing gets done. And because there is this thing of like paying homage to the people that have been there forever and respecting that, but then also saying like, but let's come in and do something, like, and I can see that in my brief involvement in different things. A lot of times the old timers don't want to, it's the way we've always done it. And then you get someone that comes in with new blood that's passionate, and then you get resistance.
Yes.
And then also there's so much red tape. Like you can't really do things anymore.
Right.
I mean, if you get someone that says, hey, I'm going to come up and bring my tractor up to the Grange and redo the driveway, like I'm sure that can fly. But also like if you're doing it to the letter of the law, it's like, well, is the liability insurance there or this or that? And, it just becomes like where it's a chore. And I think, again, that's just something that we're dealing with in our current world. I'm not faulting anyone, but it's hard to then show up when it's a chore, versus like, I have these resources and this manpower. Let me do my work,
I can tell you though, I think Grange, if you showed up and you rolled up your sleeves, you'd be welcomed with open arms.
Yeah.
It's a pretty small town. It's pretty, let's just get it done. Let's fix it.
That's good to hear.
Yeah. So like Hannah Smith, she's a big part of
She runs the Barstow store.
She has the Barstow store, her and Dave do. And they're both a big part of the Grange. And they've always, they came to it from their families being in the Grange. And they're kind of like the keepers of our Kettle River Grange. Cool. I would call them that. I'm sure at times they would like to not be that. But Hannah and I decided, she had gotten it voted on years ago to repaint the Grange Hall. And just had not gotten it done. And I said, okay, Hannah, I can help. Like, let's have our meeting and I'll stay and paint, or I'll come before and we'll paint, and then we'll paint after. We were painting during our meeting, like making motions and voting, but we were painting. And we did that. I think I came 2 or 3 nights. We actually never really painted together besides at that meeting, but we were just using what time we had when we could do it. And we would, okay, I did this part, you do this part. And it's so pretty in there when you walk in. It's modern.
Congrats.
Like it's black, it's gray, it's not old wood paneling, it's updated. Just that little bit.
That's awesome.
So there's things like that we could use help on. We just don't have the manpower to do it.
And you're just saying all you got to do is roll your sleeves up.
Roll up your sleeves and show up. And
gotcha.
It's the same with I think the back steps need repaired. And there's just little things that need done at every Grange Hall. But there's other things we're doing in the community. We take tickets at the Northeast Washington Fair. We need help taking tickets. We help take tickets at the rodeo. We need help taking those selling those tickets and doing that portion. And we get a little bit of money for that too. And then that goes back to the Grange. So there's so many volunteer opportunities to help keep these Grange buildings going for, and they're not super expensive to rent. And they're very valuable in our communities, because sometimes it's like, where do I hold a function? Yeah. Your Grange Halls are totally available.
Have you thought at all about different ways to spread the word, of you're coming in here and I'm like, I don't know really anything that's going on. And I'm a guy that doesn't do social media. I kind of make 3 moves throughout the day, work, home, and back to home, but have you thought about it all? And I did actually, just because I was curious, I just Googled the Kettle River Grange, and I was able to pull the Facebook profile up publicly. And I think the last update was end of October or something. Yeah. But have you considered a newsletter or, social media presence on, Stevens County resource page, or I feel like a lot of what we struggle with here is getting the word out. Yeah. And then maybe not even getting the word out, but then also seeing the value in it, right? I wonder, and maybe that's the cool segue of technology. I wonder if there's this opportunity where you and Hannah set up the camera and time lapse your paint, and then that gets put onto Instagram or Facebook. And, like we got halfway done. We would love 2 or 3 other people to be able to show up next month to come help this. And then like people visually see that you're there rolling your sleeves up. I feel like that has the snowball effect where if you just hear about it at the wrestling meet or at the coffee table, you're like, everyone's well-intentioned of like, oh yeah, that sounds cool. But then they don't do it.
Right.
But everyone's kind of sucked to their phone. I mean, that's where we're at. Like, have you guys tried to delve into that at all as far as?
I feel like we've almost just been in survival mode. And
For sure.
And I feel like I have brought in more I shouldn't say it wasn't but collectively starting the youth Grange programs in our area has brought in parents, and they are thinking about, oh, I need to come to the subordinate meeting, and they become a part of it. And sometimes it's just they pay membership dues, and that's okay too, but it's better if you show up and you help. And we have positions over at the Ferry County Fair that we need to be at, and that doesn't always, we have volunteers, but sometimes they can't get over there. So there's so many different opportunities, but you're right. We need to get the word out more. And I actually did just do an interview with the Silverado Express yesterday. And she's like, I want to talk to you more about Grange in the future. Perfect. Yes. Let's talk about Grange.
That's awesome.
So yes, we need to get it out more. And that's part of the reason I'm here is the Granges are still going. Show up.
For sure. There's
usually a phone number posted at the door to figure out when the meetings are.
Okay.
They are different for each place. I think Fort Colville is it's a Saturday and usually the 3rd Saturday of the month, I believe. But usually they have the meeting that starts, they have a meeting and then they prepare the food that they donate by donation before bingo starts. So there's always that opportunity too.
Yeah. Just hypothetically speaking, let's just say that the Kettle River Grange gets $100,000 donation. What would you do with that money?
I can tell you they would replace the windows that are cracked and don't have any insulation whatsoever near them or around them. Update the building so that it's more self-sufficient. It's not costing an arm and a leg to keep the lights on and the power going.
Do you know what year it was built?
That's a really good question for that. Do you know? Did you look it up?
I don't. So I didn't have enough time.
I want to say
but I found a 300-page thesis from a gal in 2012 from University of Washington that is just on Washington Grange Halls.
Wow.
And I didn't have enough time this week to prepare for that. I combed through it. I pulled one quote that I'll share real quick, or piece of information. I want to dive into that more. I'm going to print it off and read it.
Yeah.
I found this really interesting though. Quote, the most unusual fundraising method identified during the study was a successful effort by Greenwood Park Grange, number 590 in Stevens County, to finance, purchase, and remodel of a former school building. In June 1963, the Grange purchased 10 head of feeder cattle, which were pastured through summer and fall by members, and profitably sold at year-end by the Davenport Livestock Auction Company. The auction company also contributed their yard fees and sales commission to the Greenwood Park Grange. Ultimately, the National Grange advised, if a community really wants a Grange Hall, if the membership is willing to put in some work and sacrifice, it will be no trouble to pay for the hall.
Wow.
And so I just thought, June 1963, Greenwood Grange, they're sitting there wondering, how do we fund this thing? And they use 10 head of feeder cattle.
That's Grange for you.
Isn't that cool?
They think outside the box and they keep it real, just like you said, across the table.
Yeah.
You got steers, I got pigs. Let's figure it out.
And then this Davenport Livestock Company also then they see the good movement and then donate, on top of that. And I feel that's what we're kind of feeling right now, right? Is that sense of community is coming back.
Yes.
Like it's been gone for a while, but it feels, I can't really put my thumb on what that is, but it kind of feels, well, shoot, here we are having this conversation.
Yeah.
Like I feel like it's a slow movement, but it's coming back. It's exciting.
It is exciting. And it's exciting, I've been really proud of the Youth Grange program reestablishing and coming back and our fairs accepting us. and allowing these kids in another avenue to be a part of the fairs program, but also to keep that community grassroots where we meet and we hold our meetings and we have dances. We have, we're constantly leaning on each other. The subordinate Grange, they are amazing. They love to hear about how the youth Grange is going. They love to hear feedback from the community that, oh, your Grange kids came and helped pick up garbage at, the fairgrounds or wherever we've been. We get amazing feedback. And I'm so proud of these kids because they truly are. They're amazing little humans and they make me proud all the time.
That's great.
If I'm ever asked, hey, can you guys help out with this? Usually we can show up. There might be 10 of us. There might be 50 of us. Yeah. But we can show up. And they usually roll their sleeves up and they get to work. Before the last fair in Ferry County, we went in and helped clean the hall. So that was sweeping, and there's a mouse problem there. I mean, it just gets vacated, and so it's not very clean, and it's kind of gross work, but these kids just got to it. They started sweeping, cleaning, dusting, painting, and making it presentable for the community. So these kids show up when you ask them. Yeah. And that makes me proud. This Grange program is important. Yeah. I would hate to see it go away.
So personally speaking, what's the age of your two kids?
16 and 13.
Yeah. And so they've been involved in this for quite a while. Mm-hmm. They're also involved in sports, dirt biking, all the activities. What role do you feel that, like the Grange plays in their upbringing? Like, because our job, right, and I'm stealing this from a buddy of mine, but his family motto is that our job as parents is to get our kids ready for the world and not the world ready for our kids. And so what role do you think that the Grange, of all the activities that your kids do, your kids are very active in all things that you can do here as a kid, what role do you think the Grange will play in their success of getting ready for the world?
I think it's having accountability, showing up. I mean, I can vouch my kids don't always want to go to a Grange meeting. Oh, is that today? I just want to stay home. But no, we're a part of this and we help lead it. And Riley was voted the master this year. So she's, got to be there and lead the group.
And what a cool thing at a young age to have a leadership role in something, right? I mean, I think that's the ultimate goal, is that we want to create leaders. Yes. Right. I mean, I think that was probably somewhat the intent of FFA, Future Farmers of America, like also leaders of America. And your daughter's in a leadership role at a young age. And just like we said, there's a ton of value in working at Sandy's when you're 16. There's a ton of value in having this leadership role of this thing that's bigger than self. Yes. And I think that that's a very important lesson. And it sounds like the Grange is able to be a tool to teach that of, it's so easy for a 16-year-old kid right now to just be completely immersed in self. Yeah. You're scrolling the feeds, you're looking at the phone, our phones have a camera that face us so we can do selfies. Like we're just so immersed in self. Right. And at least one day a month, your daughter's in a position where she has to think about what's best for the team. Yep. Like what's bigger than self and how do I lead this group of kids? And like, man, there's got to be a ton of value in that, because what in 2 years she enters the world. Yes. Right. And she needs, and I think that's the thing that we're feeling as parents of, like, the whole helicopter thing's about expired. Like we can't protect our kids from the world. And newsflash, the world can be an evil place. Yes. And it's life is a beautiful journey, but it has darkness too. And learning that at a young age, I think it's like getting the chicken pox when you're a kid versus when you're 40 years old. Right. Like it's easier to recover when you're a kid, and it's easy to learn these lessons younger. And then you have that when she goes and steps out at 18 years old and she's out of your house and saying, okay, world, here I am. At least she has some time spent in something that isn't self and that is part of, a bigger idea. I think that's really neat.
It is. And not making them, when we do community service, not all of us, we don't. I could think of other things I want to be doing on a Saturday too. Yeah. But they need us. The community needs us to clean up, to help up, to step up.
Yeah.
Whether it's helping Lori clean the grandstands before the rodeo or us mucking out stalls after the rodeo. She doesn't have the manpower down there to do that on her own in a reasonable sense of time. And so when these kids show up and help do things for our community to keep our grounds clean and great and for the next project or next event, it's bigger than self.
And I think that too, that line of work it's not as easy to promote, right? Like and I'm not taking anything away from anyone, but you know, if there's a skate park or a pool or a jungle gym or, you know, like that's a big staple thing that we can see. And then the people associated with it, which is so awesome. But yeah, who's picking up the trash after the fair?
Right.
Right. And that's, man, what a noble thing that you guys are doing. Cause that one doesn't get the feel good or the press that maybe some bigger things do. And I think they're all important. I don't think one's more than the other.
Right.
But that's huge, you know, to come in and I don't know, and I'm speaking for myself, like that our community, you know, I hadn't really thought about that. Like I've gone to the fair and I've bid an animal and I'm like, oh, well, I did my thing and I feel good. But how'd that get set up and taken down and all the work, you know, and our kids are working with their parents and community leaders to do that. And to your point, we got to keep that going.
Yes. And that was another part of my, this conversation I wanted to have was get out there and help your community. Do what you can. I mean, I became part of the fair board. I'm the pig barn superintendent this is year 3, maybe 4. Oh boy, I'm losing track. And there's so much that goes into that. There's, you know, we're thinking of things now for fair. We're prepping now for August. And there's so many volunteers that are behind the scenes, setting up for those exhibits, setting up the barns, getting ready for everything to fall into place for 4 days of complete fun and chaos all at once.
For sure. Yeah.
And I just go to your fair board meetings. If you want more to happen, go to them. Go to your school board meetings. Go to your local gun clubs. There's a lot of youth involvement there. I mean, there's so many great things that happen in our community. And I'm so thankful for the people that show up and teach and lead and take away their weekends for our youth, because it's building the next generation.
For sure.
And it's super important.
Yeah.
And I can't thank, you know, those that have stepped up and helped my kids enough.
Yeah.
And I hope that I've done that for others. And I hope that we can collectively as a community who live in a really great place. There's some scary things that go on around us in a big aspect, but could you think of anywhere else you'd really rather be?
Yeah.
And how we raise our kids and the things that we are able to do. They can walk the streets at night if they had to. They can walk down to the gas station and get a soda if they wanted to.
Yeah.
That doesn't happen everywhere.
For sure.
It's still a little scary, yes, but we live in a pretty cool place. And the same with, you know, going to the fair, dropping your kids off for the day to hang out with their friends. You can't do that everywhere.
Yeah.
And so just being a part of this community and the people that can step in and help, if you're in a place to come help, do it. If you have an expertise in somewhere, find it and go show it, because we all need help. We all learn and start somewhere. Like I said, I learned how to do this with my kids, and here I am. I have first generation pig farming going on at my house. I have been running a pig barn, and I've been trying, you know, just learning with my kids, going along with them.
That's so cool.
But showing them we can step up and lead it. And I hope my kids someday want to be a part of that and pay it back to the kid, you know, to the next generation below.
Well, and we can try to teach all we want to our kids. And probably, in my opinion, the best way is to lead by example. And it's through osmosis.
Yes.
And maybe they rolled their eyes now when you say, hey, we got to head to that meeting. But it's in 10 years, you know, when they saw that you showed up to paint that building, that you're showing up to collect and, you know, do all these things, like 100% it's by example, you know, and that's that delayed gratification thing of, you probably won't see that in your kids today, but you will, you know, and that's huge.
Yeah. I made my kids shirts 2 years ago that said, no, I don't know where my mom is, because it comes with a price sometimes for them because I'm not getting to give them all of my attention at once because I'm running a barn of 100 kids.
Mm-hmm.
But I hope they know at the end of the day, I'm doing it for them too.
Yeah. But the main message that you're here saying is it doesn't even have to be in particular. I mean, you'd love to see numbers and more involvement in this Grange, but the bigger picture is just get involved in your community. And there's so many opportunities to do so. And then you actually get to put almost your money where your mouth is. And if you want to see change, then be change.
Yes.
Right? Like, and show up and do that. And it doesn't require this crazy thing of policy or funding or politics. Most of it is just roll your sleeves up a little bit, show up and give a Saturday, and you can start to actually move the needle and see, actionable change.
Exactly. And I mean, there's a lot of things that need updated, and not just our Grange Halls, but like our local fair. We could use new rabbit cages. We could use new things. And if you have an idea or you're a great grant writer, guess what?
Yeah.
We could use you.
What's up?
Yeah. Find us.
Yeah.
But no, it's just one of those things I'm super passionate about. I would have never told you when I graduated in 2004 and walked away from Kettle Falls High School that I would be in our community giving back as much time as I am.
Yeah.
I'd have never put it on there.
Well, I think
and I never really was raised. I mean, my family was well known as well, but I don't remember us doing community events or putting our time in. As a younger version of myself, I don't really remember that. I remember volunteering for things like through school, but I don't remember us actively going out and doing, being a part of this bigger picture. So,
well, I think
it's there.
That I get to say, for me, and then also for the community, like, thank you.
Oh.
I mean, that's huge. That's awesome.
Yes.
Appreciate your efforts. And I love the can do it attitude. Like, that's where it starts. And I really do believe that has the snowball effect. You can sit and talk about it all day, or you can go do the thing.
Yeah.
And so I commend you for doing the thing. Like,
thank you.
That's awesome.
I appreciate that. And, I didn't just get here overnight. Like, I have a lot of people that support me. My husband is a big one. He taught me to get out of my own way and do it.
Awesome.
And I really truly believe that he was the perfect person to step up and, be who I needed him to be. As I talked about my background. He was everything I needed, and he allowed me to say, you can. Like,
that's great.
The only person in your way is yourself.
Yeah.
And
then to have that support from him as well is huge.
He might think I'm crazy and I have some wild ideas, but at the end of the day, as he says, we're a team.
That's cool.
And I might not be at home making dinner, but I'm out making a change.
That's huge.
And he supports that, and I appreciate it. He might not always be out there with me doing it, but he's supporting me on the back end. And I think that's super important too.
That's awesome.
So it's just full circle.
For sure.
It's full circle to sit here and have a conversation, but it's such a great opportunity. Like, he's got the Grange podcast. He's got something close to my heart, and let's talk about it. So,
well, and too, for our listeners, like I've known Ashley, forever, but she reached out to the Grange podcast email. And so, if you're listening to this and saying, hey, something I'd love to talk about, like, please do. 'Cause, that was a week ago, and here we are.
Yes.
And like, so thank you for one, listening, and then two, saying, I got something that I'd like to say. Like, that's hopefully the intent behind this, is that's an open seat, you know? And so I appreciate it, because you're being vulnerable. We're talking about your life and your kids and everything you're doing, but I appreciate that vulnerability. It's something Joe and I talked about. Like, I think in order to see the change, like, you've got to be vulnerable. You've got to put yourself out there.
Right.
That's been very uncomfortable for me. But it feels, like it's the right thing to do in the same time.
And it comes back to that word you said, and this is one of my favorite words. My coworkers make fun of me because I like to use this a lot, but communication.
Mm-hmm.
We can always probably get to even ground by just communicating.
Yeah.
And it's important.
Yeah.
I think we've all learned that podcasts and the communication of them have taught so much.
Yeah.
In the last...
and effective communication. Like, that's when I go to these meetings and you only have 3 minutes to say something, and then the board can't respond. And it's like, well, that's not communicating at that point.
No.
That's talking. And there's a difference between talking and communicating.
Mm-hmm.
And And I think there's power in communicating, and I think that there's friction in talking.
Yes, I totally agree.
Yeah.
I just think it's great that we have this opportunity in our community, and
Yeah.
I'm excited to see who you have on here.
Awesome.
Like who's going to be next?
Yeah, I love it.
But I think I've listened to 4 of 5.
Cool.
Pretty cool.
Yeah. Well, I love it. Is there anything else that you want to plug before we wrap up here? I mean, I think we covered the Grange and all that really well, but you'd mentioned the last week of spring break, you guys are hosting a play.
Yes, I'm going to look at the dates.
Let's look up and get those dates real quick.
Look them up for sure. Because if you can get tickets, because those dinner ones, they sell out fast.
Okay.
So, but if you can.
Where would someone purchase those?
I know you can get them at the Barstow store.
Okay.
I think sometimes Sandy's has them.
Okay.
You'll have to, don't quote me on that. But, so the play is the 10th, 11th, and 12th. Okay. And the dinner theater being on the 12th.
April 10th, 11th, 12th.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. So if you're interested in that, hit up the Barstow store, or Sandy's would get you pointed in the right direction if they didn't have any.
Yep.
If people are interested in volunteering at a Grange, is the best way to show up and see the number on the door? Or what's the best way if someone's listening right now and wants to get involved? Or
I have a community, 2 of us oversee it's called so it's NEWA Granges 509@gmail.com.
Okay.
Debbie that runs the youth program at the Addie Grange, and I oversee that. And that's the email we use when we send out flyers for youth enrollment for the youth programs. You are more than welcome to send me an email or Debbie an email, and we will get you pointed in the right direction. It's just a general email, and we say, oh, this is the Grange closest to you, or whichever direction, whatever questions you have, however you want to help.
Okay.
You can always reach out to that email.
So I'm going to do my best and say that I'm going to try to put that link in the description of these podcasts. I think I know how to do that. Cool. This will be the first time giving it a shot. So I will get that link from Ashley. I will put that into the description on YouTube, Spotify, and Apple Podcasts. So if you are interested, you could click on that, and someone will get you pointed in the Grange closest to you. Yep. Cool.
Yeah. And, the Kettle River Grange, we've actually got some enrollment from Republic and Curlew, and They come over and are participating. So that's pretty exciting.
And then do you have dates on the sale, on the fair yet? Do you know those dates?
I do know those dates.
Let's get those out real quick too.
So your Northeast Washington Fair in Colville will be held August 20th. Oh, sorry, that's load-in day. August 21st through 24th, with your fat stock sale being on the 23rd.
Yep. So if you're curious from this conversation at all, at a minimum, please show up to that and just go observe it. If you're in a place to support it, there's 2 or 3 different ways that we discussed that you can do so. Remember that you can still donate to a kid and not have to purchase the floor price or the support price. You can just donate, like Ashley said, $25. That's an option. But at a very minimum, please just show up and take it all in and see if there's something that you want to be part of there. And I'm sure it'll be easy to then get the wheels turning.
The full understanding of these programs. And then the Ferry County Fair, because that one's near and dear to my heart, is always Labor Day weekend. And so that falls on August 29th through 31st.
Cool. Right on. Well, I've really appreciated getting to learn more about the Kettle River Grange. I thank you again for all of your efforts, for coming on here and talking about it. And let's try to get together maybe after the fairs, and we can just wrap up how the season went, how everything was going, and then any new updates. It'd be cool to get together every few months, talk about what the Grange is doing, what's going on. We can talk enrollment numbers, projects that you guys are working on. Right. Like if you're a painter and you're listening, this would be an opportunity, or like you said, hey, we're really could use someone that knows how to build some stairs or whatever. So let's get together every few months and we can do some Grange updates. I think it's fitting with the name of the podcast and the fact that you're actually boots on the ground. I'm excited for that opportunity, and hopefully we see some old organic growth, which will be cool.
Yes, it's exciting.
Cool. Well, get involved, everybody, however you can. And thanks for tuning in.
Yes. Thank you.
Thank you,
Thanks.
Ashley.